You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hello and welcome to Freight Famous, the Rose Rocket podcast spotlighting the brightest minds in the supply chain industry. At Rose Rocket, we're dedicated to making the supply chain smarter and more connected. Our software helps over 100,000 people from startups to large enterprises streamline operations and stay ahead. We're passionate about innovation and expertise, which is why we bring top industry leaders to share their insights with you on Freight Famous. Learn more at roserocket.com. I'm your host, Justin Bailie, co-founder at Rose Rocket. Today, I am thrilled and happy to have Chad Lindholm, VP of Sales at Clean Energy, joining us to chat about cow manure, natural gas, ROI for trucking companies, and Cummins engines. Chad, thank you for being here.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for having me this morning, Justin.
My pleasure. Kind of reviewing the show notes before we started recording, just taking a deeper dive into clean energy. Super interesting. So maybe just for the audience, if you could give a introduction to clean energy and just the background and mission of the company.
Yeah, my pleasure. So Clean Energy has been in the natural gas for transportation space for nearly 3 decades now. We were originally founded by T. Boone Pickens, along with our current president and CEO, Andrew Littlefair. And we've really been at this for quite some time with a focus in building, running natural gas fueling facilities across North America. In those early days, the heavy focus was in transit buses, refuse trucks, and across airports in primarily the U.S. We've since, while we maintain that position, we've since shifted over the last decade or so into a stronger focus with heavy duty transportation and trying to find ways to deliver a sustainable carbon negative solution into the Class 8 truck space with renewable natural gas. And renewable natural gas certainly is something that we are excited about. We're heavily invested in, along with many channel partners in our industry, as we see it as a viable solution to assist and complement various efforts in reducing carbon emissions and criteria pollutants for goods movement.
So I've got so many questions. One of them I'd like, and I know this, but can we talk about renewable natural gas and what it is and how it's made? Because this is super interesting to me.
Absolutely. Who would have thought, certainly in our company, that we'd get involved in the upstream part of essentially capturing methane emissions, capturing carbon that otherwise would go up into the atmosphere and is not a good thing. And lo and behold, in both landfills and at dairy farms, this is a challenge, always has been. And technologies evolved over the years to a space today where us, along with various key partners, are able to capture that methane. Again, both at landfills primarily and dairy farms. Dairy farms is really where we're excited and most focused on. Methane's naturally released. It's a organic waste from
where, Chad? Cows. Say it from where?
Cow poop.
Yeah,
who would have thought?
Yeah,
cleaning up cow poop. So capturing that poop, putting it into digesters, ultimately going through a cleanup process, and once that's done, you have renewable natural gas, green gas, that is injected into the same pipeline infrastructure that already exists throughout our country. That gets injected into the pipeline system and ultimately then is nominated to the fueling network that we operate, which is 600 plus stations strong. It's pretty exciting.
Okay. So this is going to be, if anybody's in the business of transporting gases like this or the production, you can turn off because this is going to get super novice. But for anybody else who's interested in how this stuff works, then you want to keep listening because I don't get this. So so we go to a dairy farm and this is from the cows pooping or the cows farting? Like, what is this actually from?
It would be from the collection of the manure. So
Okay.
capturing all the cow poop at the
Okay.
manure itself.
Got it. And you collect that from like it's shoveled? Like how does it get from the ground, like where they poo to the digester?
So what's nice about dairy cows is they get brought in several times a day to milk. And while they are milking in these barns, this is, very highly sophisticated
Yeah.
industrial type operations. They are pooping. So they're pooping in we'll call it a central area. That poop's then collected by various machinery. It's piled up and it's ultimately collected, put in what's called digesters, big holding tanks. It's heated up through the holding tank process. You're capturing that methane as opposed to allowing it to release if you didn't pull it all together. And through capturing it, you're eliminating those carbon emissions that would otherwise go into the atmosphere. So you have a significant advantage there as far as sustainability goes. You're then transporting that methane gas once it is clean enough to meet pipeline spec, no different than what we think of as normal exploration services to extract gas through wells, which we've done, for give or take 100 years. And whether it's going to your home, whether it's going to power generation, or ultimately whether it's going to where we believe is the most beneficial use, transportation, and it is because of the emission reductions you can achieve there, you're doing a whole lot for the environment and ultimately to help fleets and their shipper clients achieve the sustainability goals that they've set forth.
So what happens to the after you've captured the methane? What do you do with the methane-free poop now at this point? I don't want to like focus on the poop part so much. I don't mean to. I'm just curious
sounds
about
like
the
it.
entire. Okay, maybe I do, but we'll find. We'll see at the end how this. If we never get off this topic.
You sound like me talking to one of my boys. They're just so
Yeah.
how does this work? Who would have thought?
Oh, they must love it. But what do you do? What do you do with the leftover? What do you do with that?
Sure. So that ultimately comes dry bedding, believe it or not, in the environment for the cows themselves. It's used as organic fertilizer. So it ultimately gets repurposed.
Oh, interesting.
And that's something that's important. So not only are we partnering with farmers throughout this country and the businesses that they run, we're working with them in partnership to solve a challenge they already have. We then are creating a sustainable source for this methane capture, as well as what they can do then with the manure itself once it's cleaned. And along the way, it's giving them an added revenue stream that they otherwise would not have outside of their normal dairy operations.
Yeah, that's super. I was going to ask actually about that. If they're making money on this, this is a great benefit to the farmer then. So you're solving a problem for them, and they're making money on something that otherwise they're turning a cost into a profit. It sounds like, because this otherwise would cost the money to deal with. I'd have to imagine.
No question, they're turning a cost, a challenge into a revenue center, which is exciting. It's something that we're certainly proud of in the partnerships that we have with a dozen or so farmers in different projects across the country right now.
The scale of agriculture generally blows my mind. So I think the answer to this probably will too. How far can you go with just these farms? Like how much capacity is out there from the? I don't know if you've got a heuristic that's an easy line to draw there, but like maybe the question is there enough capacity in these dairy farms to meet a portion or a significant portion of your mission?
No question. So right now in the RNG upstream space, the transportation industry at the end of this year will deliver close to about 1 billion gallons of renewable natural gas. So we're excited about that. And this has grown exponentially over the last decade or so. The vast majority of that fuel currently being delivered is being captured from landfills. And that's still an ongoing great use. You don't get the carbon reduction benefit as much as dairies. That's why a lot of the focus has been on dairies. There's just a lot more methane that gets released in a dairy operation than a landfill. But it's a great piece to further reduce that carbon intensity score that all fuels now have. Having said that, dairy continues to take a bigger piece of that pie. And what we see holistically happening over the course of the next decade or so is there's anywhere from, depending on the studies that are out there, anywhere from 8 to as much as 10 billion gallons of RNG that is available across a network of dairy farms, as well as still a handful of landfills. That's not going to solve the entire transportation conundrum. In the heavy duty space, we typically say that there's about 40 billion gallons of diesel fuel used on an annual basis. So this is complementary and a piece that will solve a bigger problem in, again, carbon reductions. So there's a lot of capital that's going to be used over the next decade or so. We're a piece of that. A lot more is going to be put into space to create jobs, to put more projects into use throughout, a lot of the Midwest and the Rust Belt states, which we're excited about. But we've really just scratched the surface on the ability for the industry to continue to deliver RNG into the transportation space.
That's super interesting. I mean, it's not an insignificant. If you talk about a $40 billion need, and just so I know, does natural gas and diesel are they 1-to-1 for the need? So if there's 40 billion gallons versus, I don't know the metric to use here, but like, is it 1-to-1 on that? So you are basically effectively, you have potentially 25% of all fuel needs basically captive inside or potentially captive inside the dairy market. Is that about the right number there?
Yeah. So the fuel is measured in what we would refer to as a diesel gallon equivalent in terms of energy density or energy content. What's interesting that isn't lost across the shipper and the carrier space, and certainly across regulating authorities like CARB, the EPA, is your carbon score on dairy farms right now, on average, is a minus 300. Your standard diesel score, this is above the line, so you have kind of zero carbon, right? Which electric talks a lot about. And while there's zero tailpipe, it's debatable on is it really zero, carbon because of upstream and this and that. So the total score on diesel is about 100. Electric, depending on the energy source to produce electricity, could be give or take about 40 CI. Again, dairies are negative 300. So you take that negative 300 on a 100 CI score for diesel, it's like 4-to-1. Mm-hmm. So you just mentioned kind of the 10 billion to the 40 billion, and we're getting a lot of math here. That's like you just taken your carbon intensity for 40 billion gallons of diesel and eliminated it all the way down to zero.
Right.
When you start blending and averaging that in.
So basically taking a quarter of diesel away and put otherwise and substituting with this would render that entire fuel network, call it carbon neutral, if you will, right? It's you're talking about, so it doesn't, what you're saying here is it doesn't need to be the whole thing in order to have the effect that we're actually going for.
You got it.
Right.
That's cool. What gets us excited. And that's really what our focus has been is, we talk a lot about, our tagline, as of recent, has been shifting carbon into reverse. And if you can do that, you have exponential benefits across the entire supply chain in the heavy duty transportation space.
I will get to the transportation side of it, but I'm curious as to why wouldn't a farmer want to do this? Like what are the objections to this?
There really isn't any objection. There are farmers across the country that continue to come forward, say, we'd love to partner in a project. Mm-hmm. It's highly capital intensive, so they tend to look for partnerships to assist in ultimately making these projects a reality. When I, think of why wouldn't a farmer want to do this, it's less why wouldn't they not want to do it, and it's more what would preclude a farmer from doing this. So to just hit on that real quickly, the size of the dairy farm certainly is important in terms of how much manure can you collect, because you've got some CapEx costs up front to achieve a reasonable return in the marketplace. And what we found in that is, based on today's technology, we can go down as an industry to farms that have roughly about 1,500 head. So the big ones have all but been captured over the course of the last decade, the 5,000 plus. These are big farms, right? So we're down to about 1,500. We firmly believe that technology will continue to evolve. We'll get economies of scale, costs will go down, and we'll be able to hit that next threshold, which is kind of sub 1,000 head
Got
in
it.
their farms. And there's a lot in that space that we are actively looking at now. There are opportunities to what's termed as cluster these dairies, so aggregate them together in terms of capturing manure at one, collecting it and combining it from another adjacent dairy. You've got some, of course, added cost there in transportation and moving around, but ultimately trying to find a way to offer this resource to dairies that are smaller as well.
That's super cool. So what we're talking about really here is access to scales. The cost of the technology install on this is such that it would just be such a long period of time for there to be an ROI on the payback. That's basically this. When farms are too small, it's too long of a payback period because they're not producing enough to really make it work. And that upfront capital, I'm assuming, is pretty equivalent to whether you have, well, maybe not, but whether you have 1,500 or 500, you're probably paying about the same for the
Absolutely.
materials, right?
And
Okay.
you're generating so many gallons,
Yeah.
a year. At the end of the day, those gallons carry a RIN and an LCFS credit value with them that
Got it.
certainly helps in the entire economic case here. And that's ultimately what comes down to evaluating one site versus another.
What I really like about this, besides everything, is the fact that it's actually in market working. Like you're already kind of like at scale at the large ones, and you're already talking about, like you're in kind of like, well, you've been doing it for decades here, but this part of it, you've penetrated a certain part of market. You're moving into markets downstream. Like it's a going concern business and a going concern product that's actually doing things today and it's working. It's set up. A lot of this type of ambition is still very much in the ambition stage with companies I'm talking to. So it's pretty neat to talk to somebody in a company that's you guys are elbows deep in this. I mean, you're fully doing this. This is happening. It's working and it's scaling, really, right?
Yeah, no question. We talk a lot about that. One of my favorite, and I stole this like most great sayings that excite me, and it's get beyond the headlines, and whether that's downstream technology. And we'll get into the actual engines infrastructure here in a minute. It's the upstream stuff. What our industry is doing today isn't new, evolving, garage technology that's yet to be proven, yet to be economical. It's been around for decades. It's not necessarily the new shiny object. While we have great new industry advancements, we have a tried and true technology in upstream RNG capture projects. We have a network of fueling facilities across North America. There's a pipeline infrastructure that serves residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation space that has existed for decades. And we have proven engines for the fleets that at the end of the day just need to ensure that they can reliably go from point A to point B. What a concept.
What a concept. So switching to trucking companies, the thing I'm actually curious about, and I'm not an expert in this by any means. So you said, sorry, did you say 300 or 600 fueling stations for
600, but who's
600?
counting?
Yeah, I am. So how, like, I'm trying to go like more, we're using the term upstream and downstream a lot here, but I'm going to do it again. I'm trying to think about more upstream in terms of, so how does a truck become a natural gas truck? Are they manufactured that way? Is this an aftermarket? I know nothing about that component. Sure. I believe they were all diesel, and that's how I thought they worked.
Sure. It's a great question. It's something that, we talk regularly with fleets about. These are not conversions. These are not aftermarket, unwarranted, uncertified products that hit the road. So in the, whether we're talking again about transit buses, vocational application, which is primarily refuse and ready mix, shuttle buses in and around airports, and ultimately Class 7, Class 8 trucks, we have a certified OEM product that comes from Cummins Engine Company. And Cummins is on, gosh, don't hold me to this, but the 5th or 6th generation of what we'd coin as heavy duty engines. Mm-hmm. What they've recently launched, which is ultimately now combined with RNG, what we view as a game changer, is a 15-liter engine. They refer to it as the X15N. Over 10,000 of these are in operation over in China. They brought this technology to the US. And this is the evolution of what they previously had launched roughly 10 years ago and pushed into the truck space, which was a 12-liter engine. It's a good engine. Certainly found that it was slightly underpowered for a whole litany of different applications and topography and so on and so forth. So with an OEM certified engine that's coming right off the assembly plant in Jamestown, New York, which is where it's manufactured with American jobs, we have an engine that gets dropped right into the OEM platform from currently PACCAR, either in a Peterbilt or a Kenworth engine. No different than what a fleet otherwise would do in purchasing a diesel truck. And they're going to go to the same dealerships, get the same warranty support, service support that's already in place across North America. Next year, we're excited. We've learned that Cummins is partnered also with Freightliner, and we'll have this same engine available in the Freightliner chassis. So to have an OEM, same dealer network certified product that comes off the assembly line, has then a natural gas fueling system installed where the fuel is ultimately stored. That's the only thing that you're going to see different or somewhat noticeable on these trucks. Otherwise, they look the same, they feel the same, they have the same diesel-like reliability, comfort, torque, and horsepower that drivers are familiar with and ultimately need to have a good experience and to do the job day in and day out.
And so, and then the question becomes from a trucking company, well, how much is this going to cost? So let's just go through the engine itself and then the ongoing, let's talk about the economics of this for a trucking company.
Sure. Everyone wants to be green and sustainable until it costs something, right? It all sounds great. Who's going to pay for it? And all that's out there now. We're in this great period or challenging period of uncertainty, right? As whether it's a government agency or the media pushing various technologies that, frankly aren't here. Whether they can work or not is still TBD, but the economic case is absolutely something that doesn't float. On the natural gas space, we're excited because it does make business sense. And here's how it kind of works. You buy a brand new RNG powered truck with an X15N engine and a fuel system. Our goal as an industry is to be able to deliver that truck to the fleet for roughly $75,000 more than they otherwise would spend on diesel. This was without subsidies, without tax credits, without grant funding, anything that may or may not be available depending on various programs and state funding sources. So you say, well, how do I pay that back, right? And certainly that becomes the challenge in itself. The fuel savings itself by running these trucks on RNG in most markets is over $2 a gallon. So if I can save over $2 a gallon on a $75,000 investment per se, our modeling on that, depending on how many gallons a year you're using, but in a typical 80 to 100,000 mile a year for-hire carrier application, you've got roughly a 2.5-year payback. Mm-hmm. So 2.5-year payback on a 5+ year asset, in our view, starts to make sense for these fleets to take a hard look at, well, what can I do to complement other technologies I'm evaluating, and certainly my standard, fuel of choice, which is diesel, to achieve some of these sustainability goals that I've set out and or my customers are asking me to do. Are we trying to take over an entire fleet or an entire industry? I already said, well, no, we don't necessarily have enough fuel to do that. And we recognize that there should be a portfolio approach of viable options that work for fleets to continue to be able to go out in an open market and have the freedom to choose.
And from your network, I'm assuming this is, I can't believe I'm even saying this out loud because it's such kind of a dumb question because I think the answer is very obvious, but these 600 locations are strategically networked where you can get to any of them wherever you are in the US, and this would allow you to fuel anywhere. And, it's being in Canada, when I think of that, I think of there is a lack of charging stations for electric in certain places that has kept me personally a little bit apprehensive about kind of going all in on, say, a Tesla, just because some of the places I drive, I'm like, shit, I could get totally I could be in trouble in those places, right?
Sure,
So,
don't be stranded.
right. And so I wonder about, that network, but I have to imagine it's pretty robust. So you can just confirm that it is, because what I do want to talk a little bit about is you just mentioned something I was going to ask about, was the customer um, demands on this. And how are you? So for me, who has built a business on uh, selling things to trucking companies. It's so the narrative that I've often found to be challenging is um, trucking companies, and I'm going to be very broad with these types of statements, but I find are certainly a lot more operationally focused versus, and when I say that, it's like they think more about cost savings than they do about growth, because growth in of itself has costs associated to it. And sometimes it's actually not good to grow. I'm going to bring on a new account, fine, but I need to now buy a new truck and hire a new driver, and all that actually has a cost to it. And is this going to make sense in the long run for me as a business? So I think the businesses are set up and designed in a way, unintentionally, I think, that growth can be challenging. But I think in this narrative, it's a little bit different, because you're saying that this is an increasing demand in the market, especially certain markets. California comes to mind, and I think that we are seeing that. So I've heard, it's almost like I've heard the rumors that large brands are starting to ask for more ESG in general compliance around things and asking for reporting. And I think these things are kind of hard to get. But are you seeing purchase behavior that is being driven by customer demand?
No question. So
Yeah.
we constantly in our discussions with the fleets that we work with, and hey, we're fueling about 50,000 vehicles on a daily basis, and that's a blend again of the various markets I talked about, not just trucking, but
Sure.
a big chunk of that certainly is in the truck space. In those discussions with the fleets, and a lot have moved into this direction, but again, it's a percentage of their fleet, and they're saying, well, how much more do I do? Does it make sense? I have a customer, in a lot of cases, a shipper that's come to me and has said, we're looking to reduce our scope 1 or scope 3 emissions. Um, Deliver us some options for us to achieve just that. And in doing so, we would think that certainly the carrier is being proactive, as ensuring that they can retain that business, hopefully grow it over time. Maybe that earns them more lanes, more shipments, so on and so forth. And we become a very important part in showing them what they can achieve in those carbon emissions. And then they deliver that information to their customer. And that's gaining significant traction across the space as they market these services,
Mm-hmm.
gain new customers, or they just solidify and hold on to and extend the existing contracts that they have. Let me mention the fueling piece that you started with, because that's important. It's kind of, hey, I want to go out, I'm going to buy 50 trucks. Where do I fuel them? And the 600 plus sites that Clean Energy operates throughout North America, we're one piece of the industry. Now, being the largest in this space, we certainly have the most robust infrastructure, but that's not all that's there. There's well over 1,000 sites in the industry that are available today. They're not all open 24/7 to the public in what you'd think of as a card lock or a truck stop operation. So let me give you kind of further breakdown of our network. It's a combination of roughly 250 to 300 what you'd think of as public access, open 24/7. These are at your truck stop type locations, and a lot of them have your same amenities, your C-store, your truck wash, your parking, and so on. And we've partnered, like others, with various truck stop and card lock companies that are in the right locations.
Okay, so you're inside. I don't even know who, but like I'm gonna use the example, and it might not be, but you're inside a Flying J, for instance. Like you're part of that, like whoever it might be. So you're not necessarily in this case you're referring to, and I'm wondering where this is going, standing up your own clean energy stations, like sort of soup to nuts.
Right. It's a combination of both. Certainly, there's value at already being where the fleets go.
Yeah,
So
100%.
we're looking to partner, and we have several partnerships in space, whether in place, whether it's historically been with Pilot Flying J, you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
current partner of ours. And we have various partnerships with BP and Total. You mentioned being up in Canada. We're up there with Tourmaline right now. So viable channel partnerships are critical to continue to push and grow this industry on the downstream side. The rest of the network that is currently in place for clean energy is your backlot fueling. And fleets do a combination of both. Some fleets might have a stronger emphasis on backlot private fueling, while others fuel primarily out in the network. So your backlot fueling, the fueling experience certainly is comparable to outside fueling. You just have it dedicated to your own fleet. And fleets that are large enough or demand enough fuel in a period of time historically have opted for backlot, and then have certain routes out across the network that they can ensure that they get access to. And by having those lanes, when I say lanes, I mean, our industry is on all the heavily trafficked lanes already. Is there a station everywhere? No. Do we need some more sites? Absolutely. But for fleets to pick a lane that's going to get from point A to point B and back for the drivers, going to satisfy the needs of the shipments for that customer, by and large, the fueling already exists. And there's ample capacity at these locations, meaning, do you have enough space, ingress, egress, queuing, capacity to ensure you're getting quality fast fills? And when I say fast fills, 8 to 10 gallons a minute, so fleets can get in and out of there and back out on the road. The answer is absolutely. We'll do roughly 400 million gallons in fuel sales and service this calendar year as a company. With the network that we have the ability to easily double that without adding more stations. We'll continue to add sites as needed, but that just shows that one company as example, we can continue to add volume and demand to a network that already exists.
There's so many things I love about this company. One of the things that scares me is the capital cost of this business must be pretty intense. I mean, just thinking about, and as much as the farmers are taking on some of the costs and amortizing it, just there's a lot of assets in this business. Like there's a lot to, how do you guys, there's two things I have, divergent questions. I want to start with this, but how do you as an organization, I don't know. This is pretty, I don't know if I can really go here with it. I wonder about, how do you guys think about managing growth against, it's a very abstract question, because the question I want to ask, I can't, because I think it's just too prying, but like, how do you guys manage the strategy of this business, I guess? Because there's almost like so many directions that you could go in, and it's one of these businesses I feel like you would just want to do everything right away. So what leads you to the next strategy, or building the roadmap? Like what is the mission, I guess, maybe the actual question inside of this?
Well, along that mission, there's no question that patience has been key.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We, I think, assumed way back in the early days this thing would take off a whole heck of a lot quicker. When I say early days, it's 30 years ago.
Sure.
And while Mr. Pickens' vision has always been spot on, I got a domestic product. It's cleaner, it's cheaper, it's ours. That was something that he preached and believed firmly in. And none of that's changed. Now we have something that is also sustainable in bringing RNG in. And we have engines that work in the right space. The timing of that drive and that vision certainly wasn't maybe accurate early on. And we believe we're finally at a precipice where we're there, we've arrived. Practicing that patience, what we've also learned is, because of the capital requirements, both upstream now in this whole other space to extract RNG, and then downstream, even in building fueling facilities, having key strategic partnerships has been critical. I mentioned earlier, and I'll just kind of emphasize what I meant by this. I mentioned some key partnerships with one, for instance, BP. BP and Clean Energy have had a long-standing joint marketing agreement to not only joint develop upstream RNG projects, but to ensure that we're collectively able to also go source RNG from, right now, a portfolio of roughly 70 different locations, farmers and landfills, that we then essentially take the offtake on and flow into our network of sites. We have another partnership with Total. Total happens to be our largest shareholder, so large French energy major. And with them, we can go in and share in the capital requirements under that joint development agreement to build the upstream sites. The rest of it, ultimately comes with a good amount of risk, in being certain that as you're building out sites, you have good line of sight on truck demand and fleets that are going to purchase these trucks, utilize these locations. And the chicken and an egg has always been a quandary in our industry. We're not alone in that. And how quick do you get out ahead to build the network of sites to show the fleets they have places to fuel, versus waiting for them to just buy the trucks, and them buying the trucks? Well, they're not going to do that if they don't have anywhere to fuel. So there's a balance there. It's something that we've juggled with. I think we've gotten significantly better at as an industry over the course of the years, and something we're mindful of.
Thank you. Because the question was, how the hell do you pay for this? But you just answered it. So thank you. Thank you for being transparent. I also want to ask you, how long have you been here with the company? You speak incredibly articulately about this company, and you feel like the CEO of this thing. How long have you been here? And you're super skilled. I think there's a lot of people listening to this being like, how can I hire this dude? Like you're pretty impressive. What's your story?
I appreciate that. I have learned from the best. So having the just dumb luck of being brought into this company fresh out of college, I've had a front row seat, not only into Mr. Pickens' vision and his guidance, but our president and CEO since day one. So if you think I know what I'm talking about and I have passion and love this, meet Andrew Littlefair, who runs this company. And I don't hold a candle to that guy, but I certainly appreciate it. I like to say that over the course of the last 21 years at this company, I've worn just about every hat. And coming out of college and being told, hey, you're going to go talk every day to taxi cab operators at Los Angeles International Airport and convince them why this natural gas thing works as opposed to gasoline powered Crown Victorias. For our younger listeners, there was a thing called taxi cabs. They were yellow, and eventually Uber and Lyft took them away. But that was a big market for clean energy back then. And I cut my teeth amongst many other opportunities along the way on talking day in and day out with individual owner operators in the taxi cab space. And that ultimately then evolved into working with transit agencies and partnerships there, and refuse trucks, and ultimately now in the truck space, and overseeing a team of about 50 individuals that goes out and each and every day is a solutions provider to the fleets that we serve in those various verticals. And we're supported by another great group of individuals that handle engineering and design and construction of these sites and the ongoing operation. And in Whole Clean Energy is over 500 employees strong today, and has had great experience and a heck of a journey along the way that I'm just certainly tickled pink to be part of.
Well, your humility and your deference has actually, endeared you further. So I think this is it looks good on the company to have advocates like you, who can really stand in, I think, at that and speak the talk to this level, and advocate. I think so. Good for you, and the company is lucky to have you. Just maybe on kind of as we kind of start to wind this sucker down. Based on what you've learned as you've kind of gone into the heavy duty market around trucking specifically, what are some of the things that you're seeing that maybe are worth passing on? Some, kind of your general, we'll call it like, what are some of your top 3 advices? It doesn't have to be that, but what are some things that maybe people are missing the point on, or that you think is something that just needs to be heard, to the industry?
Yeah, well, you just hit it on the head with a key point, and it's heard. So our message as an industry kind of gets lost in this moment, certainly of uncertainty. And I said earlier, and I'll say it again, get beyond the headlines. So there's a lot of confusions out there. And I can't imagine being an operator today and trying to balance the regulations that have gone from, we're going to set an emission reduction standard, maybe even a carbon reduction standard, to now, no, we're just going to pick a technology and we're going to try to jam it down your throat. And we're going to put a lot of confinement around that to push the technology. It's just not ready. So, we look at that and say, let's take a step back. And this is conversations we have regularly with elected officials, with regulators, certainly to a certain extent with media, that we need to have a all solutions are on the table approach to achieve the reductions we're trying to get as a country. And if we're able to do that, allow fleets then the ability to choose in the industry as a whole that serves these fleets. So let's just think of fuel and technologies. We're all going to find a way to compete on an open playing field and deliver those solutions and allow them then to have a portfolio of options that can exist that meet certain requirements for customers, for the lanes that they're on, for the type of products that they're hauling. And if we're able to do that, a lot may shift here over the course of the next several months with what's going on in this country. If we're able to do that, I think we're going to ultimately be in a position as not just a country, get off that soapbox, but as an overall goods movement transportation industry to better serve our clients while achieving those sustainability goals that everybody's excited about and we ultimately need to see.
Well said. And I think that's, I think you kind of hit on, without getting too into the weeds on it, but certainly some of the electrification mandates, I think you're speaking of it. I think there is a general feeling, and this happens in other parts of just policy, not just in clean energy, but it really can be challenging when, broadly speaking, I think that government can feel a little bit too far from the problem, and I think it's very difficult to. I think the spirit, it's the right idea, right?
Sure.
And I think but the execution, I think, is wanting. But in a lot of conversations I've had or what I've overheard, there seems to be. And I don't know what's happening at a decision-making level, of course, but there certainly seems to be some, hopefully, momentum that's working more towards what you said, which is you said it perfectly. You take a step back and get out of the vortex, get out of the clickbait, and start kind of thinking about this more critically. And I think you said something interesting there too. It was create a competitive environment, because those tend to work really, really well. And they drive better efficiencies, better technologies, ultimately probably expediting the goal in which that we're all trying to get to through just good old fashioned capitalism, right?
No question. No question.
Yeah. That was a real pleasure. Thank you for spending some time with me. Really enjoyed our conversation. And where can our listeners learn more about you and learn more about clean energy?
Sure. Cleanenergyfuels.com is our website. We're active on LinkedIn and your various social handles. Again, my name's Chad Lindholm. I'm our SVP over sales and customer service. Find me again on LinkedIn and look forward to helping serving anyone's needs and answering questions along the way.
Chad, thank you. And great show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, take care.